So in a couple of days' time, I'll be heading over to Portimao to test Honda's new 24 spec Fireblade. But before going out there, I've headed here to Honda Racing in Louth to learn a little more of the tech and spec of the machine. So aesthetically, the model has moved on from the 23 version of the Fireblade. You can tell that immediately by the different wings, but the real meat of the enhancements to the Honda are actually hidden in the engine. That's what we're going to talk about first, because there are so many tweaks that have gone into that engine. Think more evolution than revolution. There's nothing absolutely groundbreaking, but lots and lots of differences that have made the collective package so much more potent and capable than ever before. So ultimately, you're still looking at the same inline-4 motor with the same bore and stroke and the same 214 brake horsepower output. But if you study the tech and specs a little bit closer, what you'll see is that both peak power and peak torque have both been reduced by 500 RPM. How's that? Well, that's a reflection of the hard work that's actually gone into the engine. So pretty much most of the major internals in the engine have been altered. So think crankshaft, that's now lighter by about 450 grams. The titanium conrods of old have actually had 20 grams removed from them, so the engine's going to spin up faster. So the inlet valves are also lighter, the compression has been upped, and the camshafts, both inlet and outlet, have been reprofiled to alter the lift and duration. They've even managed to shave an extra 250 grams from the crankcases themselves. The message is that Honda have gone in, they found all these different areas where they could tweak away, improve that engine, and the combined effort of all of these little tweaks means that the motor is more potent, more powerful, more characterful than ever before. And now it's time to get a little bit techie. So unlike on this bike here, Tom Neve's 2021 championship winning Fireblade, the new 24 spec machines will come with split throttle bodies, as per the Ducati and the BMW that it's up against. The end result is that you're going to get out of corners faster and get into them with more control, because this is ultimately going to affect your drive and your engine brake control. So as for the dash, that is going to be a carryover unit from before, but the good news is you're still going to have 9 different levels of traction control, 5 different power modes, 3 different levels of engine braking, 3 different levels of wheelie control, and 3 levels of quick shifter plus launch control. And another piece of really welcome news is the fact that for the first time since the 2020 Blade and onwards, you're going to be able to go into the electronics and completely switch off the ABS. So you get the full potential from the Brembo Stylema calipers. Personally, that's been my biggest gripe with the Fireblade of recent years, so I'm super excited to see what that's like. So while I'm down there getting a bad back and knees, I should probably point out that for 24, you're also going to get a new 3rd generation of Öhlins electronic suspension, which promises to move the handling characteristics of the Honda on massively. So from the outside, the new frame might look very similar to what you're seeing here on the older Blade, but actually, through making adjustments to the thickness of the chassis, Honda's actually managed to shave an extra kilo from the frame itself. And by doing so, they've also managed to fine-tune both the lateral and torsional rigidity of the frame quite significantly. And last but not least, they've also managed to save 140 grams just by altering the length of some of the bolts used on the frame mounts. Honda. So the new wings look a lot more conventional than these here. They also sit a little bit further forwards, and whilst they produce the same amount of downforce, Honda claims that the difference in shape actually has a more positive effect on the leverage of the front wheel. In terms of ergonomics, there have also been changes made to the handlebars, which now sit 19mm taller, 23mm closer towards the rider, and the pegs have been lowered by 16mm, so it should be a bit more comfy. The seat height remains at 830. So you get the point, the whole bike's been given a good and proper rework. The question is, how will that all translate in the riding experience? Well, I better go and pack my bags, because the time has come to give this thing a go. Okay, so welcome to an absolutely drenched Portimao. We've been here all day and I managed to get 2 sessions in on the blade in the dry, which has been amazing because it was monsoon this morning and then it just dried up perfectly so we could get out on this bike. And I'm so excited to tell you about it because this is a machine that has really kind of come of age. So when this bike first came out, 2020, I was in Qatar and it was exciting. It was revolutionary for Honda back then. They brought out something super special, super trick, but it maybe wasn't the most refined. It was groundbreaking, but it needed a lot of polishing. Fast forward to 22, they did a few updates, but it still wasn't quite hitting the mark. Now, this is the blade that should have been. Why so? Well, okay, there's lots of different reasons. I've been through all the tech already, but I want to kind of look at, you know, from a riding point of view, where this bike has really evolved, where it's really moved forward. I think it makes sense to start with the motor. So as already mentioned, again, lots and lots of work has gone into the engine. What that means in the riding context is actually, for the first time ever, you've got so much more oomph, so much more torque and drive from down low. And there's this kind of seamless transition from that kind of strong mid-range up to the top end. And it feels ballistic. It felt ballistic before, but now especially, it just feels next level, exciting, but just connected. You know, the throttle connection even on that note is the most refined, silky it's ever been. So we've had a little bit of a compromised day because of the weather, and we've had to kind of adapt to that. But I mean, I've been riding this thing in full power at all times, maybe kind of, you know, cranking up the torque control or whatever, just to make sure I don't go high siding. But even in doing so, you know, one thing which I've really picked up on is just that initial throttle pickup is so much more smooth than what it's ever been before. And as I say, you know, that kind of translates all the way through the rev range. I mean, this thing sounds amazing. And actually on the audio note, one other big feature to this, you know, is the split throttle body. So there's a lot of hype around that. I understand why Honda went down that route. You know, I understand the gains it's going to bring, but actually until you actually go and ride this bike and feel firsthand what it actually means, how it sounds, you just can't appreciate the difference it's made to the package. I mean, actually, I think that's the thing that smoothed the blade out most of all. You've got, you know, cylinders 1 and 2 that basically come on a little bit before 3 and 4. Well, I guess it depends on kind of what you're asking of the throttle, but that's pretty much typically the case, you know, and it all relates back to how aggressive you've been. But because you've got that staggered transition, there's not that kind of aggressive kick up the arse that can be disturbing and upsetting of the bike and the suspension, etc. It's just so much silkier out of corners, and likewise, you know, doing the same going into corners. And there's this beautiful noise as well, a real deep throaty resonance that you get to hear. You know, there's certain parts of this track today where I've been going around where you're almost kind of just holding a little bit of throttle, but you're not balls deep with it. And when you get that engine in the sweet spot where you're just asking for a little bit of drive, you just hear this real throaty bark from the engine, from the exhaust, that sets this bike apart from anything else on the market. It sounds really exotic and exciting, and like I say, you know, it also kind of sets you up, it kind of eggs you on saying, all right, I'm ready for you. When you're ready to crank that throttle open, let's go. And the minute you turn that throttle, it's just so fast. This track is brilliant. It's got a couple of really fast stretches on it. But I think by the time I was braking on the start straight here, it was probably around the 270 kilometer mark or something like that. And you get there so fast, seamlessly up through the box as well. This bike's always had a great gearbox, and the shifter and blipper on it is as clinical as ever. Really aids you in getting up to speed fast. And likewise, when you start coming down the box, you can just throw gears at this. I mean, there are a couple of sections here today. I think even the first corner, down from 6th to 3rd, I think it was on the blade. So real quick transition down through the box, no lock up of the rear wheel, just no hang-ups, no headaches. I think coming back to the blades that have come before this, of this generation, you'd always be fighting something. You'd have a bit of a hard time on your hands because they just weren't refined. But this bike right now, probably again, coming back to the split throttle body, you just got that little bit of extra fuel going in, smooths everything out. You know, and also, you know, I guess that moves me on to the actual suspension. So this, as you know, has got the Öhlins GM3. I actually went out in the first session just hopping on it, with the suspension set in A1, automatic 1, and Honda had predetermined a bit of spec for us to kind of work in terms of power and torque control and all that kind of stuff, and away I went. What I found initially in that first session was that I couldn't always get the bike to kind of pull into an apex in the way I wanted, or maybe I was having to really exaggerate, physically to get the bike to the spot I wanted, and sometimes that meant kind of compromising on corner entry speed, or moderating the throttle. And actually coming onto the start straight, there's a super fast right-hander here that you kind of hit from the top of a crest downhill, and then you drive back uphill. And again, I was just having the bike run a little bit wide. So I actually spoke to the guys from Rollins and Harv from Honda Racing UK. We had a look at the setup, and kind of quickly denoted that the rear was too soft for me, and we needed a bit more preload as well. So we kind of went in, adjusted on the dash, the setup that I had, kind of put another half a turn of preload on the rear shock as well. And the next thing you know, the bike in the second session was turning so much sweeter, felt so planted. I mean, the great thing I should say in all this is the standout feature of the Blade since 2020 onwards has been the front end. And the great news is that the front end on this thing is still exceptional, but you just are getting such a better connection with the rear as well. So again, bringing in the power delivery and all the rest of it, it's so much more talkative. There's a lot more feel, even when it's on its side, just going through a corner, so much more stable, so much more controllable and usable. And it's almost like through all these refinements, Honda's they've joined up the dots. They've had a good aim of where they want to be, and they've now managed to kind of go through and tweak things exactly how myself, and I dare say a lot of people, even actually the race team, from Honda Racing UK, Tommy Bridewell's been here, he's been super excited about just how strong a package this bike actually is, because he was saying one of the biggest strengths about it is how fast you can get into a corner. So how stable it is on the brakes going in, and obviously what speed you can run into the corner. And then, mentioned that the kind of the mid-corner aspect is fantastic. And the big problem that Honda have had, of old, especially on the racetrack, is just that drive out. I'll come back to that in a minute. But now, from what I'm understanding and from what the race team are saying, that's been solved. And a lot of that comes back down to, I guess, the rigidity of the frames, so the tweaks they've made there. I mean, this thing's obviously running on the standard swing arm. The race teams, I think, are probably mostly going to use the Super swing arm they've been developing, in BSB. But yeah, the real hang-up for them has been getting out of corners, and I think there's some real excitement for them about how they're going to, embrace, this new frame and the new added feel and grip and performance that this bike's now going to have to offer. Again, as mentioned, the ergonomics have changed. What I can't tell you is exactly how comfortable this bike is. So I've done 2 20-minute sessions with it on a racetrack. I haven't gone and spent half a day on B roads or whatever. So I'm not going to turn around and say that, it's transformational and this is the most comfy bike in the world or whatever. In fact, it's not going to be. But what I would say is that it's notable how much more relaxed and comfortable the package is. It still feels quite aggressive, but it doesn't feel like it really forces you down in the way that, again, the first gen was, the first 2020 Blade onwards did on your wrists. It feels that bit more accommodating, a little bit higher up in the bars. And likewise, you have got a little bit extra leg room down below. I didn't really struggle with the 2020 Blade. I know some people did, but it wasn't a hang-up for me in particular. But what I would say is this feels more sizable. If you are a really big person, you're still going to find it cramped. There's no two ways about it. But for me, at 5'10", I felt it's an accommodating package. I felt it's a very talkative machine. I felt it's a very torque-full machine. The drive on this thing is insane. And just collectively, it just feels more electrifying, more characterful than it's ever been before, more competent. And actually, one other feature which I really should harp on about is the braking. So again, down into the first corner behind me, you're ploughing on from such a high speed, it's all downhill, everything's working against you in terms of physics to stress the bike. Additionally, it was just so smooth. You'd maybe get the rear end wagging a little bit, but I'd always meet an apex and be able to run as much speed through as I wanted, and that was just such a lovely feeling. Being able to commit to a corner and not worry about, am I going to make the line, am I going to be able to carry whatever speed I want through. It just did it. And There's so much stuff I want to bang on about with this bike. The truth of it is that I need to do more on it. I think that, one of my priorities when I get back to the UK and the glorious weather that undoubtedly we're going to have is to get hold of one of these, do some serious road miles, get it on some UK tracks and get a fuller feel of it. Because I think one of the things we haven't been able to do today is go into the potential of the electronics. There's such a fantastic suite of tech on this bike, from your engine braking to your traction control, to your wheelie control, to all kinds of different, functions and power modes and all the rest of it. And I think that, with the limited time we've had on track today, there's a lot more to this bike than I've experienced today, just scratching the surface. So, more work is needed from my part, and it's going to be an absolute pleasure to get back on this thing, to spin some laps, to clock some road miles and just explore it more. What I would say is Honda is in a fantastic place with this motorcycle. I'm not just saying it, it's really exciting to see them keep developing this package rather than give up on it or whatever. Some brands are kind of now start to turn their back on the liter bikes. It's great that they've gone back to the drawing board. They've figured out those areas to iron out and they've made them so much better. This thing is going to be a weapon. And I'm going to say this now, especially to the UK audience, if this doesn't win Superstock 1000, I don't know what to think or what to say. This thing is an absolute weapon. And I think that, if the Superbike teams are in a position to kind of, draw the most from this package, it's going to be right up there. But more to the point, exciting bike, great to see it on the market. The UK price is going to be £23,500 with the carbon spec weighing in just over £26,000. But more to the point, it's kind of on the money in terms of cost and all the rest of it. But also more to the point with performance and with attitude and character and desirability. It's really, really ticked so many boxes for me. Been a fantastic time. Like I say, can't wait to do some more.